Hello, amateurs. Welcome to another episode of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some wonderful rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host, Tim, and I've got another amazing guest for you today. We played together when he was a young man at Esher Rugby Club, and he went on to have a fine career at Richmond, where I played against him for Ealing. And he recently broke the internet with some ridiculous skills whilst playing for Stow RFC. Please welcome Mr. Jamie Gibbs. Gibbo, how are you?
Good, mate. What an intro. How am I meant to live up to that? Ridiculous.
Well, I mean, it's all facts, mate. It's all facts. As I said in the intro, I first got to know you at Esher. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about your experiences at Esher. How old were you at the time as well? Because I know you were young, but I'm not sure exactly how old.
Yeah, so I was just out of university. So I must have been 22, going on 23. And I think, like most people coming out of university or academy systems, a friend brought me to Esher. A common friend, I think, Nick Moore, who's obviously the brother of the once great Matt Moore, who was a brilliant player at Esher, for his last few years in rugby. And I was a bit lost, after rugby. I enjoyed it at university. The social side was great. Hadn't really performed or done anything special at university. And I just wanted to meet a new group of people in London, which is where I was working at the time. And fell upon you old boys to look after me for a couple of years.
Amazing. So tell me about your uni rugby playing then. Where were you?
I don't talk about it too much, actually, because where I'm coaching now at Stow, we get a lot of Hartpury University lads coming down. And I actually was at Hartpury. And I think people probably look at what I've done in rugby and thought that I was in the first team at Hartpury or second team, playing in the Saturday team, as they call it. But I wasn't really. First year was very much freshers. Second year, a bit of second team rugby. And then finally, possibly a few appearances for the first team, but not much really. It was full of quality players. I obviously had a lot of work I needed to do, and it took a bit of a backseat for a few years. And I think actually it gave me the energy to get back into it properly when I left university and went to London. And it ultimately was quite a nice break, I think. And Esher was as you know, is a lovely family club, huge community around it. And as soon as I went down for a first couple of sessions with Nick, it was good having friends that were already there. I was pretty much hooked, and the rest is now a long list of clubs in South London. but it definitely, it was a massive help going there. I was on the fence if I wanted to play or not, and Esher really provided something that I needed at the time.
So was that on the fence whether you were going to play rugby or not? Completely?
Yeah, it very much was. And thinking about why I got into rugby in the first place is that my dad's a massive rugby fan. And I'm an army brat, so I went to private school and I was given all these opportunities as a kid, and rugby was the one that stuck. And when at university things weren't sort of going my way, he was supportive of that. He would support me and say, don't have a year away or have half a year out. But actually, when I was a bit lost, he was the one that reminded me that I had rugby. I've always played rugby. I can play rugby. And when you go to a local rugby club, even if it's in the national leagues, you get an immediate friendship group, you get a social group, you get evenings out, you get a place to have a beer, a place to watch live sport. And he reminded me that I've got that skill set. And, if I'm going to make a change, move to London and get a job, what a better way to meet people and new people than join a rugby club. So he was a big reason why I sort of got back into it. And I'm looking back at it now, I'm super glad he persisted with me.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. I never knew that. That's super interesting. So obviously I had a brilliant time at Esher, and it sounds like you did as well, as you kind of alluded to there. Like it was playing at a high level at the time, I think, in the championship. But it was a very, very social club as well. So what were your experiences like there?
Probably different at the beginning to you. Being younger, played a lot of second team stuff. And I agree, I got loads of access to what we call first team players. And I think it's something you wouldn't get in a more professional environment. They'd sort of keep that sort of top 30, top 35 away almost from the other group. I fondly, and some not so fondly, some of the sessions we had with you guys who were playing at a high level. And we had some fantastic scrum-halves, didn't we? We had a chap called Gaz Cowley. There's a guy called Patrick O'Grady who I went to university with, who was fantastic. Ian Barnes. You know, the list is quite long. And I just sort of attached myself to them. And in the sessions, I gnaw Barnes' ear off and try and pick up as many ways to improve as possible. And we had quite a good scrum-half bond there. And I think it just kept me enticed enough to think that I could break into that first team, because as you say, championship rugby is no joke, and the level we were playing at the time was really strong, you know, playing those Premiership teams that are dropping down from the Premiership. So I really wanted that, and I think it was eventually 3 years into it roughly when we were in National 1, I kind of got my break and had a really good second half of the year where actually she got promoted back into the Championship. And I was then pulled to another club. But that, again, was through someone I'd met at Esher, who would always sort of trump me, a chap called Neil Hallett. God, I almost forgot his name then. And he again, was another person at Esher who saw something, would always be there, you know, to gnaw my ear off or give me some tips. And yeah, I mean, I do remember the social side. One particular pre-season tour to Italy. I think were you there at the time? Yeah, you definitely were. Perugia, I believe. It's got so many fond memories. I can't possibly. There was a pink social, and I think there are still photos flying around at the time. But it was a big part of Esher Rugby Club, and in a really important part of Esher Rugby Club. And it's something that clubs that I subsequently joined also had. So it's obviously important to me to have that ability to sort of release some tension rather than just play rugby the whole time.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I want to pick up on a couple of your scrum half compatriots there. In particular, Pat O'Grady, who's gone on to be a really exceptional coach, and Garrett Cowley as well, who's a capped player for Samoa. So those seem like two very good people to be learning your trade from. Can you talk a little bit about maybe those two?
Yeah. So Patrick O'Grady, I think the first day in halls at Hartpury, our rooms were next to each other, and he just, ahead of his time, I believe, was into his nutrition, was going to the gym, and we're talking about almost 20 years ago now, aren't we? Or 15, 16 years ago. And it just, suddenly it wasn't just ability. It wasn't just about how you pass a ball or how you kick a ball. I'm quicker, I can step. All these things that players naturally have just through their genetic makeup. Suddenly it was someone who was strong, and they'd really refine their skill through being there every day, training, whether it be strength, whether it be technical. And I remember just being a bit shocked. You know, I was the best guy at school. I was the best guy in my county. You know, it'd be fine. It's just university or whatever. And that was a massive shock to the system, but also something that probably stayed with me for the rest of my career. You can't always be fit, but when I was, it was like, well, how do I get fitter? How do I get stronger? How can I improve different parts of my game that will help the team on the pitch? And Pat was a big part of that, actually. Unfortunately, he was one of those unlucky guys who had big injury after big injury, as you know, and he's been able to take that mindset and put it into coaching. I think he's done some fantastic stuff before London Irish went down or went under. He was a big part of their amazing academy there. And I think all of us, who know him, have followed his career and understand just why he's had such a big impact. The other one, Gaz Cowley, was just such a big character. He just had personality on the pitch, didn't he? He was bold, he was brash. He's one of the only scrum halves I know that off a driving maul, he'd take the ball off the hooker at the back to get the try. You know, he wanted that try. He must have scored about 40 tries from 1 meter that year. But it was just the confidence. He was physical. He had a cracking set of skills. But he really bought in. You mentioned he had a cap for Samoa, a cap or two. He came and he was part of Esher. You know, he bought into what we were doing. You know, after training, he'd be there having food with the guys. He'd stay for a few beers and a chat after the Saturday games. And he really, I think he wasn't there for a long time, but I just remember him being this massive personality, and he put that on the pitch, just loads of character, loads of confidence. And again, I think that's something that definitely when I've moved to other clubs who maybe I've gone down a league or I felt like I'm a senior player, that's something that I've tried to do because I know it can lift the younger players around you. Not two very good role models to have, I'd say.
Yeah, and two really good blokes as well, as you've sort of mentioned there.
Good guys, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, Gazza was only at this club for a year, and then he got signed by Exeter. He went and played at Exeter Chiefs afterwards. That kind of shows, the sort of caliber there. But then you headed off to Ealing, which I'd kind of forgotten about actually. So tell me about that decision and tell me about
It's probably a good one to talk about actually. I had a good year, and I think Neil Hallett had gone there, who I still spoke to. He played 10 a bit at Esher and played fullback, so we had a bit of a 9-10 connection. They were on their way up. They had a lot of guys who'd been together for a long time, and they had serious ambitions. I mean, we all know where Ealing Trailfinders are now. They're right at the top of the Championship, and they want to get into the Premiership. So I moved there in the summer. I still don't know if it was the right decision. But as I said, I've got no regrets looking back on what I did in National League Rugby. So it was probably a necessary step to take, much more high performance. And they felt that every Tuesday, every Thursday, they needed to be an improvement so they can continue to close that gap on the teams above them and the leagues above them. And that was refreshing at the beginning. I kind of stitched myself up a bit. I could probably hold my hands up a bit. In the summer, before I joined them, I was told, don't play any rugby. You've signed for us. Again, something quite new, amateur rugby back in the days or semi-pro rugby, whatever it was. We couldn't, you sort of felt you could go play a sevens tournament. You could go and play with your mates in a 10-a-side tournament. That sort of thing was generally allowed, as long as you sort of spoke to the coaches. But I was told don't. And I got an opportunity to play in the Middlesex Sevens, which I think is no more. And we were an invitational side. It was on Sky Sports. Never been on Sky Sports before. My whole family had tickets, and I was just a bit. I did mention it, and they said, "Look, we don't want you getting injured." So I think I sort of non-verbally agreed. And then I went and did it anyway. So, and this was before I started playing for Ealing. There was another Ealing player there with me, so that gave me a little bit of confidence. But it wasn't start, was it? I suppose. So I found it difficult to get into that sort of main squad at the beginning because I started off on the back foot a little bit. And when I joined the club, there was, again, another fantastic scrum half who unfortunately has had some injuries recently called Morgan Thompson, who did so much for that side, and he just knew their DNA. So trying to catch up to him, his skill set, he was particularly quick at getting the ball away, probably the quickest I've ever seen. And I just couldn't quite match up to that. And so I played maybe 10 games that year, mainly off the bench, or when Morgan was injured. And then my ankle gave me a bit of grief mid-season, and pretty early on in sort of February, March time of that season, I spoke to the coach and we decided that it wasn't working out. And I think around March time, we sort of split. I suppose it sounds like a girlfriend, sounds like a breakup. But we decided to, it's not normal, is it, to do it in season, just leave a rugby club. But there wasn't really an opportunity outside of those two senior teams at Ealing at the time. So I decided to say, I'm not enjoying it. I haven't really got into the groove of rugby, and I've got an injury to my ankle. So it was the best for both. And I had about 3 or 4 months then, just, living life in London, going to see friends play rugby, and focusing on my career a little bit, which actually was pretty good. But thereafter, I had a chat with a well-known guy in rugby, Steve Hill at Richmond Rugby Club, and it was again Nick Moore who was down there. He's my agent, by the sounds of it. It was again Nick Moore who pulled me. He said, "Look, it's great fun," and he just listed all these things that Richmond do, and it just reminded me of Esher, and I really mean that. And they had a core of guys that had been there a while that Steve had brought from him from I think Oxford University, and they were trying to do things the right way. They were trying to build traditions, build sort of socials, build giving back to your club, and all those sort of lovely things that you can do at grassroots level. And yeah, he got me. I met with Steve Hill at, I think, Costa in Putney, and he just sort of said, look, there's not much money here. Everyone's on the same. If you pay, you might get something, but not much. And lo and behold, when I turned up to my first training session, there were around 200 people on Old Deer Park. And it was a massive change from Ealing, which had, 25 guys in a gym, with individualized sessions, to go into Richmond. And you're there with, a guy could wander off the street with his boots and just join in with the session. And again, it was refreshing. I was a bit shocked at the start, I think, but there was a purpose to it. This is who we are. There's no barriers to entry to Richmond. You come in, and we've got 5 or 6 senior men's teams, and you can come and train on a Tuesday and Thursday. You can have hot food, hot shower, and by and large, if you're available, you'll play competitive rugby on a Saturday, because we've got so many senior men's teams. And it was a bit of a change in direction for me, but it was brilliant. And up to the point when I left Richmond, who were sort of going up and down in the championship as teams do now, they still had that. Still had 5 or 6 men's teams out. They still had big whole club socials. Women's section, senior section, and I feel honoured to have represented Richmond. I think a lot of the guys that came through with me at the time did as well. And that's a sign of a strong club, I'd say.
Yeah, I've got to say, I obviously played for a few clubs in London myself, but Richmond is the one that, if I could have played for one more, it's definitely the club that I'd have loved to have played for, based on a lot of the things that you've just said, along with the the long-standing tradition and all of that kind of stuff. Now, there's so many things to dig into here. The first one, with my coach's hat on, how did they organise all those people on training nights? How did it get split up?
Well, we couldn't even do it in the Richmond ground, in the RAG, it's called the Richmond Athletic Ground. It was on Old Deer Park. So, and people who know Richmond, or I suppose Twickenham area, it's a huge field. It's a massive field, and it's kind of marked up for community Sunday football. And there weren't even rugby lines down. There were no posts up. It was just a field. And, coaches had got out early. They sort of created some pitches for us. And I think if you'd been there the year before, they tend to kind of move you into groups, because there are some people who maybe haven't played rugby for 5 years, or it might even be their first session. So you don't want them to stop people enjoying it, I suppose. So they try and sort of move you into groups of ability, but not really. And the first 2-3 weeks was just all about running around, getting a blow on, trying to get fit. And a lot of coaches, a lot of grouping, and it was chaos, but it was good fun. It was just chucking a ball with your mates, and it might be 20 aside or it might be 10 aside, and everyone was there for the same reason. And then everyone would go for a shower and get some food afterwards. And it was pretty special, actually. Chaotic, but it was pretty special. And then as they went through pre-season, it sort of got whittled down, so you kind of knew who was in that first team group, second team group, third team group, fourth and fifth group, and people would start to learn who their coach was likely to be, who were their teammates likely to be. But I mean, even in that instance at the beginning, where you kind of get put into groups, there were regularly guys that played fifth team rugby all the way up to the first team, and that first team could be in the championship, and it was amazing. I think they even called it the Barney Pascal Award. So he was one of the guys that did, fifth team all the way up to first team. He played in every team. And then I think there was a year where we called it the reverse Barney Pascal, where someone started off in the first team and went all the way down, which again is no mean feat, right? But no, it just gives you a sign of just the size of these clubs. Seeing 200 guys enjoy training on Tuesday, Thursday is just giving back massively to the community, and serving all those players that maybe fell out of love with rugby at university like I did, or maybe they don't want to play football anymore. They want to come do something different, or they've moved to London. They just need a group of mates. It was there. There was no one saying, "Well, have you played rugby before? What level? You know what? Maybe not this club." And yeah, it was a lovely thing to walk into. And then I think over the years they've gradually refined it slightly so that they can take a bigger group. When you're in the championship, it's pretty tough to do training for the same group of people. So they slowly built in, like an elite squad of some sort. But you still very much be training on the same pitches at the same time as the rest of the guys. So they did very well.
So that's kind of like the rugby side. Now then, the social side, because I've played at plenty of clubs where, there's supposedly this sort of one club atmosphere. But if you put a social together, then all the first team players sort of hang around together. All the third team hang around together, for example, and there's some intermixing, but generally not a lot. From what I understand it, at Richmond, there was a real, one club feel.
Yeah.
Were there any tactics that Richmond used to kind of make that happen? Or was it just organic?
I think by not having any sort of big senior players who might be more important to the club because of how they're remunerated or because of what the role they're playing at the club, they might be doing some additional role in the club. I didn't really have that. Everyone literally was the same. If you played first team in those higher leagues, you might get remunerated a little bit of money, but it was all the same. It was it was no one getting more or less than anyone. So and so kicks all the points or scores all the tries. That wasn't the case. It literally was flat boot money just because we were in a league where you got funding from the RFU. That was the only reason. It was only really ever there for that. No one came to Richmond to, play sports semi-professional and make money out of it. That was never the case. And therefore, the coaches had complete control over dropping and promoting people. You didn't have to make difficult decisions. It was, are you at training on a Tuesday? Are you there for the team run on Thursday? And are you going to be available for every Saturday this year? And by and large, if you did that, you would get huge opportunity in the teams. So you had, I think my first year, I'm trying to remember what Hilly quoted, but it was rare that we didn't have 50 or 60 guys play first team rugby in a year. And I think that is really unique. I mean, doing the senior rugby stuff at Stow Rugby Club, which we'll come on to in a minute, I'm sure. Now, we maybe had 30 last year who played senior rugby, maybe 32-ish near the end. And I think that's about normal, because you don't have the strength and depth that you need typically to have 50 guys that can perform at that level and not put them in danger or not enjoy it, if that were, because the level is of a certain standard. But Richmond would continually have people join the club who had no expectation, quite low expectation, and they would be fantastic rugby players. And so it created this feeling of, I could be on the bench for the first team one week, and then I could be starting for the third team the next week. And that was okay, because the guys you were going to be playing rugby with in the third team were very good rugby players. And they're performing in a very good sort of London league, very competitive league. And that meant that I had friendships throughout the groups. Groups off injured. It wasn't a case of we've got 30 senior players, you're going to get on the bench for the first team when you come back. It was a case of start again, because we've found 4 new scrum-halves that have joined us mid-season who were fantastic. And it, at times you'd be frustrated by it, but it was very consistent, very consistent. And I think that meant that when you bring all the clubs together and you have a social, you've got mates in different areas of the club. You might not necessarily play with them every time on a Saturday, but you have done, and you've been on bus trips with them, and you've been on pre-season tours with them. And that really does sort of join it all up. And on top of that, I think you all know this, having been a senior player at a big club at Esher, those senior players sort of thought it was their duty to create that atmosphere. And it doesn't just happen overnight. So there was a very, very sort of functioning players committee that I think I was part of for 1 year, that was always refreshed. It always had a new player, 1 or 2 new players that joined that year. It had representatives from the whole club, including the women's section. And it meant that the line of communication between the large group of rugby players was pretty strong. Never was there a social happening on Saturday where a group felt they'd been left out. And that's down to a lot of the hard work the guys I play would put in at the front end. And that senior sort of playing group, which has, younger, newer players, the senior players, it has representatives from typically a 5th team, that all still stands and has been going for a long time. And how they feed into the coaching staff, can we target this away game? Can we change the 3rd team game to have 2 games at home so we can do a big social? that's as strong as ever, having seen some of the social they're having this year. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but once it's in place, it's much easier to keep it going. And I think that's what Richmond have been able to do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds so interesting and completely at odds with every club I played with at that level. Tell me about how it affected, or how you were affected potentially, because I know you went up and down a few times between Jump and National One. Did that affect the mood at all, or was you still sort of essentially just pushing towards the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, first year we got promoted, which I think was a long time coming for Richmond. They worked very hard, but I actually joined the club when they'd just been promoted from National to South, when you had the South and the North. I think they might still do. And they'd only just sort of got that. They had a playoff with Caldy or Caldicott. I think it was Caldy. And it was, I think, extra time win. So they weren't this all-powerful conquering team who were just going to naturally compete at National One level. But they did very well, and we did very well in National in our first season. And we sort of slowly built, it's sort of like 8th, 6th, 4th, 3rd. And eventually we got promoted. And we actually had a meeting before the end of the year when it was likely we were going to get promoted. And the Richmond board sort of said, this promotion comes with X, Y, and Z, a lot of revenue, opportunity, I guess, but it's going to be demanding on you guys to be playing in pretty much a professional league at that time. I think we were the only semi-professional outfit in that league. How do you feel about it? You guys have got jobs, lots of you work in the city, and training is tough sometimes for you. Imagine playing against fully professional athletes on a Saturday. And they actually gave us that opportunity to say, we don't want to do it. But I think the athletes and us, the competitive players, all sort of said, let's give it a crack. And I think there was a massive pull by them saying, well, look, this is great. This is what we'll do in terms of remuneration. Again, still flat fee for everyone, still exactly the same. We'll put a load of money into the tour kitty for the end of the year, so that you're all sort of subsidized on a big tour. And I remember the feeling in the room, that sort of hubbub of people going, where are we going to go? And Richmond did some great end of season tours. But that was that. And we got promoted that year. We went in, and it was baptism of fire, to tell the least. So we played Jersey our first game, and I was on the bench. And I've told the story to a lot of people because I find it hilarious to the day. And I came off the bench the same time as the Jersey 9 came off the bench. And I looked across at him and I thought, he's not a scrum half. He is a number 8 or something. It turns out he was a Tongan international who that week in the rugby newspaper had been named in the heaviest ever 15. So he was the heaviest scrum half in international history. And I was about 75 kilograms when wet. And I just thought, oh my God. And I think the first thing he did was pick from the base as a 9, as he do, ran over our 7, pretty much ran over me and scored. And I think we lost that game by about 50 points. But, it was something we were aware of could happen. And I think it's something that is the gaps closing between that National One Championship. The Champ and the Premiership have its own issues about closing that gap. It's not too much of a shock now for the National One clubs to jump up. But it must have taken us 8 or 9 weeks to get that first point, that first victory, that first within 7 points, bonus point. It was really difficult, much more physical. Training on a Tuesday was different. You couldn't just come and run around. You had to take into consideration what the guys had been through on a Saturday. And, that learning curve benefited the club as they can sort of continue to hold their rank as the top contenders to the championship, I suppose. And I think one year we came 7th in the champ, which was a fantastic year for the club. But they found it hard to sustain that. So last year they again got relegated. I don't think it's a bad thing. They've done so well to stay there with how they're running the club. And they're now in National One, and they're in an extremely competitive National One league, which seems to have sleeping giants all over the place in that league. And by all means, the club has held on to its integrity about how they want to do things, and they'll continue to do so. So all power to them for keeping that model and not being, not thinking, oh, should we take this money and maybe talk to a few other people and create an elite, very semi-professional, close to professional outfit where we can put more time into them, give them more time in the gym, nutrition, traveling. They very much kept that core model, which was same for everyone. We're going to spend this money we get from the Championship or National One on all 6 senior teams, and that's going to support all the bus journeys, all the socials, everything we want to do as a club. It's not just for those guys that are competing at that level. So, all power to them. I follow them every game. I'll be on Twitter or whatever, finding out their results, and they will continue to do well because of that model. It is impressive.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense, especially as soon as you're outside of the elite, to have a model like this, I think is just fantastic, especially in an area of London with such a historic, they're a historic club and a big catchment area. They're just going to collect so many players by doing that. Yeah. Now, one thing I want to ask you about is the tours. Did you go on any of the tours? Because I know Richmond, they tour every year still, don't they, Richmond?
They tour every year, and the one tour I wish I'd gone on, I think that's the best way to do it. So I did lots of tours, and I went on some of the smaller ones, but the one tour I wish I'd gone on, which I think was heavily subsidised by some of this championship money or whatever you want to call it, was to Texas. So we're not talking about hop across the pond. And unfortunately, I wasn't on that tour. But seeing the buzz, so when the guys turned back up for pre-season, just seeing the buzz, for people still talking about these events, just again immediately you're on the front foot, positive atmosphere. Guys have built better relationships. They've probably experienced some weird activity on tour as you do. They've roomed with people they've never spoken to. It was such a lovely feeling. I mean, the one tour, it sounds bad, I didn't go on, but I was actually in the same country as them with my then girlfriend or fiance even. They went to Argentina, and we were already out there. So, Joe and I, my wife now, sort of said, well, we'll come meet you. They're a week into tour, and we'd come meet you. And at the time, I was buzzing. No, I was buzzing. I was like, I'm going out there with my girlfriend. It's going to be amazing. It's Argentina. It's Buenos Aires. Fantastic food, whatever. But I've pretty much got a night with the guys. And it was a week into tour, as I said. And we turned up, and we were there a bit early. I was excited. It was like 50p a beer or something. And this group of broken men just came into the bar. And I think all of them were just like, can I just hug Joe? Can I just hug someone female and just like someone tell me nice things? And they were all completely broken. I mean, it was great. We ended up having a brilliant night all together. Went to some bar that they booked in Buenos Aires and had an amazing night. But they were just, soulless. They just had nothing left in the tank, just zombies sort of playing, just take me home, which in itself just shows you that they've just smashed the back doors out of it, really, haven't they? And they've had the time of their lives. And it's very much the Richmond way. And again, on those tours, you get guys who played a lot of 15 rugby, 16 rugby, who were on those tours as well. They very much opened it up to everyone and tried to take as big a touring party as possible. But I mean, it's hard to describe how enjoyable it is, but then it probably takes you the rest of the summer to get over it before pre-season just starts again, and then you're back in it.
Yeah, I think everybody listening to this that's been on a rugby tour will know exactly what you're talking about and why I'm grinning all over my face so much. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to Stow-on-the-Wold. Jamie, tell me about that? Why did you end up going to Stow?
Another good story. So my last game for Richmond was COVID. We were top of National One, and we had a massive game against Roslyn Park. And I remember COVID restrictions were kind of in place, but rugby was still going on, and we were on for promotion essentially. And we played Roslyn Park and we lost, and it made the gap about 3 or 4 points instead of 7-8 points. So it's suddenly like, oh, we haven't really lost all year. What's happened here? COVID hit, and they did the coefficiency rating where they sort of extrapolated the results and some sort of formula. And because we were 4 points ahead of Roslyn Park, we ended up at the top of the pile and would have been promoted anyway. But we didn't play any other rugby. I think that was from about February that year. Didn't play any other rugby, and it was about the right time for me to walk away. I wasn't too sure about it, but Joe and I were married, wanted to start a family, and I think with COVID, it just felt like it was a really nice break, and it was probably actually my best year with Richmond, and in terms of rugby playing, and it just felt at the right time. Whether that was or not, I don't know. But I was very much retired. We did the end of season dinner over Zoom, and I was like, that's it. I'm done with Richmond. And actually, the next 3-4 months were fine for me because no one was playing rugby. No one was involved. September came and went. I think only the championship played that year. So Richmond weren't, really doing anything. And I was like, this is great. I'm not missing it at all. We then had twins, as you know. We had twin girls in lockdown, and it kind of flipped our life upside down for the good. And but we knew we needed to move out of Richmond. We had a lovely one bed there, which we loved. Close to the ground, close to all the restaurants and bars. But we couldn't bring two girls up there. It just wasn't fair on them. So we had a short stint with my parents before we found a home in Stow-on-the-Wold, which a few people will know from the Cotswolds. And that was mainly because Joe's parents lived near us. They lived in Chipping Norton, a little village outside called Salford, actually, and they could give us some support. And because I wasn't tied down by rugby anywhere, which we had been, as you probably know, your whole life as a semi-pro rugby player, you're just tied down, aren't you? Which for about 8 months a year, it's like, don't even come near me because I'm doing rugby. So we did that. It was great. And I don't know, maybe week 1 or 2 of moving, I think even before we moved, I was starting to message a few rugby clubs. I just thought, again, it's the same principles. We don't know anyone there. We don't have any friends there. And I know when you get older, friends can live all over the world. And because of technology, the world's a small place, right? But I very much wanted that community feel that we had in Richmond, where you walk down the street, see people in the coffee shop, just through walking. So I messaged a few clubs, and I messaged Cheltenham, I remember, heard nothing back. And I messaged Stow, and Stow was particularly close to us. It's 10 minutes up the road. And my opening pitch was, I've done X, Y, and Z, probably laid it on a bit too thick, as you do. I want to coach. You've probably got a very good coaching setup there, but I'll come and coach. Happy to do anyone there, backs, forwards, strategy, defence, whatever you want, I'll do it. So I turned up to their players meeting at the beginning of the season, which was, so I'm my 3rd year at Stow now. So yeah, just 2.5 years ago. And I met a really good coach, actually, who, again, the club was displaying all these attributes that I'd seen at Richmond and Esher, and things where it just seemed like a family-orientated club. As soon as I walked in, people were shaking my hand, asking me when we moved, what's my situation, kids, wife. It just felt very friendly. And by the end of that players' sort of pre-season talk, I was a player rather than a coach. So that happened, and very much I didn't want to go straight back into Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but the person in me enjoyed it so much that I couldn't sort of stay away. And there was something ingrained in me, which was, I don't want to sort of be entitled to play on a Saturday, but not be here at training, if that makes sense. And I didn't like that feeling. And I think that must have been the Richmond and the Eshers, where you did have to put that in to stand a chance of being in the picture for selection. It wasn't just how good you were on a Saturday. It was, can you be on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and can you hang around afterwards? Not necessarily to drink alcohol, just to socialise and chat to people about the club and kind of give back to the community that's in the week. So, started training Tuesday and Thursday quite regularly. And, first year, I need to make sure I get my years right. The first year was fantastic. I think we were playing level 7 rugby, and we won the league, and we won the combination cup competition. So we were double champs, and there's nothing quite like winning that brings you closer to your teammates. And I've met some fantastic people at Stow Rugby Club, and they will be our friends for life now. I am sure of that. And I just can't think of many institutions which can do that better than a rugby club. And second season we obviously got promoted, went into a much more competitive league. Actually, you had a lot of failing National League players like myself in there, and we came against some tough teams. But again, we came fourth in the end. And this is a league with teams like Newbury, knocking around. So there's a lot of history there, and Stow really stood their own actually. And at this stage, I did feel like things were hurting a bit more. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It's probably more my brain that kept me in games rather than my speed or ability. But I knew that my powers of impact on the pitch were getting less and less. So the coach that year, he left. This was last season now. He left, and some of the senior players who've been a long time, and I met with one of the guys at the club, and they sort of said, "Look, what do you think about helping us run the club next year in terms of coaching?" And I still feel, deep down inside, I still feel like I do need a break at some point. Like, can I function a year without having 8 months of my life just taken care of? And I still feel like I need to try and do that. We put it off a bit, and we said, I'm not too sure. Joe and I, we've obviously got 2 toddlers now, with loads of things going on, such as nursery, and jobs were getting more important. But when it came down to it, and Joe is a massive supporter in this, I think that's a key part of this, is that the people around you, we spoke about my dad earlier. I'll speak a lot about Joe now. She was just, when I was joining a rugby club, she was so supportive. And when I mentioned about coaching, she could see that there was something inside me that wanted to give back. And it started off like that I was doing something that would really help this community and club. I felt like I could have a positive impact. But as I found out now in the season, that I'm still getting way more back from coaching these guys and being part of the club. Just having those friends that come from it, I still get way more back from them than I can give the club, really. And that is just it in a nutshell. I have played a few times this year, Tim, just to break the mold. But I'm mainly coaching Stow Rugby Club now, and we've got some senior guys who do play a little bit, but they coach alongside me. We've got some coaches that were here there the year before, who are also coaching. And we're stretched, writing match reports, coming up with training. Ordering all the equipment, sorting out sort of video footage. We are stretched. There are a couple of guys that bend over backwards for the club, which is just what community rugby is all about. And I don't know what Stow would do without them. And then I try and support them as best I can, mainly with coaching on the field. And I try and help with the other stuff as well. But it is a 5-6 man team every week to train the guys, pick the teams, and then get all the kit ready for each Saturday, and then do it again. So yeah, and where are we now? We're November in the season. We're sitting third in the table, doing really well. We've blooded a load of new players that have come in, and yeah, we're sort of really looking forward to the second half of the year. So
awesome.
Yeah, go Stow.
Right, we're going to come back to the coaching, but I want to hear more about your playing at Stow, because when I retired, the game had already got very fast and very physical. I can only assume it got more fast and physical in the ensuing years with progress. So my question is, when you've gone from that to then playing at level 7, like, how slow did it appear to you, like, in terms of your playing?
Do you know what? I was happily surprised at the level, and some of the individuals that were playing at this level. I think in my first year I got asked a lot of questions from guys there, young guys, going, I'm quite good at this rugby malarkey. What could I play in the National League? Could I be in National 3, National 2? And I literally would look at them and go, yeah, of course you could, but you put more effort in. It becomes more of your life. You start to do the gym work. You start to be at training an hour before. You start to stay afterwards to do your kicking or your line-out throwing, and it just becomes a bit more of your life. And I'm sure if some guys at Stow did that, they would be pretty successful in National League clubs. It was slower. The game was slower. There were more errors. And I'm a scrum half, so I always slag off referees, but the refereeing standard was lower, and that is to be expected. And arguably, because the level was lower, they had a lot more to look at. There were a lot more things that were 50-50. Technique probably is not as good because the guys don't train as much as the national leagues. And that slows the game down. When the whistle's going, every other minute, it can be frustrating. So yeah, it was a change, but actually it took me a while to figure out how I could, again, positively impact the team on the pitch, because I've never been a scrum half that taps and goes and runs the distance. Well, at least not in the national leagues. But I'd never been that guy. I'd never even thought about it really, because I knew that my skill set was in kicking and quick ball from the base and making good decisions and all that sort of stuff that comes with decision making on the pitch. But I didn't have necessarily the athletic attributes to just, as some scrum-halves do, great support lines, they might take the ball for number 8 and just go. But it took me about 2 or 3 months to feel like I actually can do that at this level. And this is with a body which is crippled with all the natural rugby injuries from the waist down, So it took me a while, but eventually I sort of found my place in the team. And I think part of me didn't want to be that guy who would just go and do these things and go off on his own and maybe score tries, because again, it was much harder than I thought it was. I just wanted to fit into the team and make the guys there, because they had a really good group of young players and they still do. I wanted them to benefit from me being there rather than me benefit from me being there. So we had a few weeks where I just wasn't that influential, and then that changed over time, And I think the way I played, the guys picked up on that, and that in itself creates more space on the pitch. We weren't all following the ball, and we had guys both sides of the ruck, and that gave me a bit more time and space to do what a scrum half should do for any team, which was just provide like consistency and pace and a bit of tempo. So yeah, it was a change, but it is always nice feeling like you can comfortably operate, on a rugby pitch, and then at any given moment, should your team need you, feel like you can do something, whether it's a really good kick or whether it's scoring a try or making that pass. I did feel like I could do that at most points in the game, so it meant I could help us get back into things when we were playing a particularly good team, or it could help us protect things when we were needing to eke out a win. So and I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think if the level was much, much lower, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. And I think that is just a reflection of, one, Stow Rugby Club, of how talented the guys were and are, but two, the level of rugby that you can find down at those. If you touch train regularly and you get selected for these first or second teams, it is very competitive. So fair play to teams that play in and around those levels.
Yeah. Now we've got to talk about it, Gibbo. The clip that went viral, posted by England Rugby, when you sliced through the defence and
it's embarrassing.
The defenders before, or you didn't score it yourself. You did unselfishly upload it, but that clip got viewed millions of times, I think.
Yeah,
it didn't feel like to be the subject of that.
But it was embarrassing at first, because I think the clip was like grassroots, And I think one of my mates was first to comment saying, he's bloody come from Richmond, the championship the year before. He's just having a jolly. He's just swatting off poor 16-year-olds, But which felt a little bit embarrassed. But actually the try against Newby, which was the one that did go pretty viral. That actually was a team try. I think when I look back at it, you've got guys who are in the right position, a good distance away from the ruck, and we've gone left and right. We've had some big carries, and it was just the right time. We're in between the 22s. We're not really in any sort of strike zone. It was the time to try and make a break around the ruck, and I do think I would benefited from the music they put to it, which was just perfectly timed with my step. And then the two newbie players falling over each other at the end, which was pretty comical. But do you know what? It was quite fun. It was quite fun. I think my favourite, lots of other people picked it up. These accounts they have on X now and Instagram. Lots of people picked it up, and the World Rugby France picked it up. And they each have their own caption for these things. And it said something like Jamie Gibbs something in French, Bob le bricoleur or something, and it meant, it basically said Jamie Gibbs, he's got more tools than Bob the Builder or something like that. And that was particularly funny. But do you know what? Just another thing that I can attribute back to rugby and say, I've been able to experience that sort of stuff. Stow Rugby could get lots of exposure, hopefully, from it, which was good. It did put a little bit of a target on my back after that, especially from Newbury, I think. But it was good. I felt like it was good for the club. It was enjoyable for the lads and for me to be around that sort of England rugby Instagram. Lots of people viewing it, people messaging guys from Stowe saying, "Oh, were you playing that game?" and all that sort of stuff. And I think that again was just good fun. And there was actually a second one where I think they just sort of latched onto the fact that I was playing in a lower league essentially, and it wasn't nearly as good, I suppose, on camera, but. Both of them, I don't finish the try because there's no God. I wasn't going to get over the try line, so I just get caught. So both of them are more about making a break, getting tired, trying to stay alive, and just giving it to someone else. And actually, some of the comments, I had a few Instagram trolls, talking
Really?
about why doesn't he finish the try? I'm thinking because I'm knackered. There's no way in hell I'm finishing it. I'm happy to do the break. I'm happy to do the pass. I'm not going to do another, I'm knackered. I'm pushing 40. So, got a few internet trolls, but it was all good natured, all good fun. Hopefully never again.
It's absolutely magic. If you haven't seen it, well, you probably have, to be honest, if you're listening to this. Okay, let's move on to Jamie Gibbs, the coach. How do you see yourself as a coach, Gibbo? What would you say your sort of strengths are in the coaching realm?
Before I sort of landed in the hot seat at Stowe, because my title is senior head of rugby. I mean, it's we've got 2 senior men's teams, but before that, I love attacking strategy. So I think, like most scrum halves, I've got a really good idea of what we do in certain situations, and I quite like coming up with new ways of breaking down defenses that are used to seeing the same stuff every week. And I'd obviously experienced some really good coaching at Richmond, Ealing, and Esher, and loads of good ideas around, how do we improve ruck speed? How do we improve ball carrying? So I picked up little bits from that, and it was all around attacking strategy. And I loved that. And that very much was kind of like, I felt very confident in training. I felt, talking to the other coaches in pre-season in terms of how we wanted to play. I had a really clear idea in my head of what Stowe can do, but what we're not doing, which is well within the guy's skill set. And that's sort of where I started, really. And there was a little bit of a learning curve, because not everything is transferable from a National League Championship club into a level 6, 5, 7 club. I can be a little bit word heavy. This is what we need to do, go and do it. And everyone looks at you and you're thinking, this is so obvious to me. Half of this is stuff that you are doing all the time, but I'm just doing it in a slightly different way. And definitely at the beginning, when we moved from our conditioning stuff into our technical stuff, there are a few things that took a while. And actually now it's only the last few games, we're starting to see some of that attacking strategy come into to the games, to key points in the games, which is really, really pleasing to see. And I did want to put my stamp on the team, and I did want to provide the guys with a few more tools to unlock defenses. And that area I felt super confident in. I'm still confident. Often when we do our training on a Tuesday, we'll have 3 sort of activities or sessions set up. One would all focus on stuff from the weekend. So one might be breakdown, one might be kick return, another one might be passing or handling. I'll always put myself in the attack-minded drill. And that's how I thought of myself. But in actual fact, the players we have at Stowe and the coach at Stowe are also extremely confident in those areas. And some of the guys we have on the pitch, are decision makers, scrum-halves, fullbacks, fly-halves, inside centres. They are really good communicators, and they know exactly how we should play. And I've found that the biggest impact I've probably had on Stowe in terms of coaching is defence. And again, it's replicating what I've seen at at National League level. And I don't mind calling him out because he's now the senior head coach at Richmond. But a chap called Rob Powell completely transformed the way Richmond play when he came as a coach when we were there. And it meant that we could not only score tries from attack, we could score tries from defence. And again, it was a principle that Stow had never really focused on. It was all about how do we keep the ball, score points, score points, score tries, have fun, get the ball wide, run around. But actually, you can have a lot of fun, a lot more fun, a lot easier to score tries on turnover ball. So, as you turn the ball over, it's much quicker. Defenses are in transition, and you can have some great fun doing it that way. So I've put a load of emphasis on that, and most of it is attitude, a little bit of technical, like spacing around the ruck. What do we do in terms of decision making, in terms of going forward, or do we hold off? People call it hot and cold, I think now. But mainly attitude, and we do a great drill again, pulled straight from Richmond, where you've got one team in the middle and two teams either side, and that team in the middle defends. And Stow had only ever done it where that team attacks. So they'd attack defence, and it's all about how do we attack better, how do we move people. But this was different. It was like the team who wins this set of drills will be the team that concedes no tries. And actually, the guys have really bought into it. So I do think guys at that level, and even at National League level, they want to throw the ball around, they want to dummy, they want to show and go, they want to chip and chase, they want to do things they see on TV. And not a lot of people want to do a tackling drill. They don't want to put, when the coach says, have you bought your gum shield? And everyone's thinking, for God's sake, Tim Tunnicliffe's in my group and he's about to knock the teeth out. I remember that, Esher. But you don't really, do you? It's wet, it's raining. I don't care who you are. There's a part of you that is a bit like, this is a bit rubbish. So we had to get over that a little bit by creating more of a game environment around it. And what I've seen is, I don't call it contact, but what I've seen from the guys now when we do this drill, it's that defensive team in the middle. It's pretty physical now. They feel proud about being in that defense line. They're loud, they're noisy, they're aggressive. And what was like touch around the waist sort of thing now was, it's pretty much shoulder on shoulder. These guys, and they're creating their own intensity, which I think is a really mature place to be. Again, for a club in the lower leagues. And we're fortunate that we get good numbers. And I spoke about this with you when you stayed here, but we probably get 50 guys in the summer, throughout pre-season, 50 guys. And we train a lot with our Colts as well, who are extremely talented. And even in the winter, we can often do 15 on 15, which I think is a really rare thing at this level. You have a lot of guys who might train one night a week, a lot of guys who are just available Saturdays. But we can still pretty much do 15 on 15. And that allows us to do these drills, which is very game specific, very sort of game intensity, and allows the guys to literally replicate what they're doing training out on a Saturday. Whereas I believe at this level, having spoken to other coaches at this level, they don't have that luxury. And often the run through on a Thursday is against no one. It's just against air, and they're just trying to get used to the patterns in terms of muscle memory and movements. There's no physical presence from another team. And everything we do at Stow is now competitive. I like to bring that into it too. So, even if it's a passing drill or even if it's a tackling drill, who can make the most tackles? Who can go the most sets of passing without dropping it? And I think bringing in that competitive mindset, it appeals to the natural person that will turn up at a rugby club, and it creates a winning sort of mentality, and it's been really nice to see the guys buy into it, really nice. And the other coaches already had that ingrained in them, and hopefully I've just sort of brought it out a little bit more on them around, when you're running your drill, can we make this competitive? Can we, say, look, the last group, they strung together 55 like clean passes in the 10-minute drill, or they scored 17 tries. Beat it, do it better. These are the lessons we've learned, make it better. And hopefully the guys see that in the training that we do. The feedback's been pretty good so far. When you're in the meat of the season, guys just turn up like robots, don't they, and do the session and go home. But they seem to be enjoying it. There are smiles on faces, and that is starting to show now in our results. We've got two men's teams, and our second team that we call United got promoted, and they're in a tough league. We found that you can't just turn up with guys that haven't trained. So we want to make some improvements there in the second half of the year. But I've no doubt we will. If the guys keep turning up to training and listening to what we're doing and buying into what we do, it's only a matter of time before those guys start winning regularly. So you can tell I'm passionate about it. There's definitely something in there. I still feel like I need a break from rugby. I'm not sure when it'll happen, but I've got a feeling lots of coaches say that. But there is something inside me which I feel like I need to share, and I think it can benefit a club at the same level as Stow. I feel like there's knowledge that I can impart on them and help them in their rugby careers, whether it be at Stow or not. So.
Yeah. I mean, towards the start of that, mate, you said you're fortunate, but I would suggest that you're probably doing a lot of good things as a club, which means that the players want to come training as opposed to all the other options that they've got. So keep doing what you're doing is what I'm saying. Just, but I don't think you're fortunate. I think you probably deserve it. Is my sort of thoughts on it.
Thanks, mate.
Now then, what's next for you, Jamie? Where do you see the future in terms of do you want to continue coaching and do a lot of that going forward, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to send this link to all the Stow people, so I can't say I'm stopping next year, can I? But I've loved it, and again, it's the people we've met and the relationships that we've made as a family have just been a bonus. Jo was always a part of what I did at Richmond. She'd be there watching every game. My whole family, my parents would be there, brother and sister, friends from work, friends from outside of rugby. They'd all come and watch, and Stow's allowed us to do that again. My dad will still come and watch Stow games. Joe's parents will still come and watch. My twin girls now come down and watch. And as long as I'm getting that out of rugby, and I feel like I'm enjoying it, I'll be staying in and around rugby as a sport. I think it has to be, and there'll be times along the way where I do need to take a step back. We've still got jobs, we've still got important jobs. Joe's got a pretty full-time job, and mine's full on as well. So fitting it in and around those things is a constant battle. But it's a nice to have. I think it's a privilege to be busy, and we seem to make it work every year. Some weeks are tougher than others, but we managed to do it between us, and it's an awfully rewarding time. Times like Christmas and end of season, you get to reflect on these things, and I think we're so used to being that busy with our lives that we would be a little bit lost without it. So it is the immediate future is finish as high up that league table with both senior teams at Stow. I do think the Corn side, which first team, has a real opportunity. And at the time of having this interview, our next two games against second and first. So we got a massive opportunity to do something good for the club. And having been involved in like a title-winning team before with Stow, when that happens, the spoils come with it. The community gets behind you. We had some fantastic socials. And it was a great time to be at Stow Rugby Club, and I would like to be able to give that back to them again this year or in years to come. And the potential is there. The under-16s are fantastic. The Colts are brilliant. They often train with the first team, first and second senior teams. And I feel like this club's in such a rich state in terms of player potential and team potential. It's just a really good place for me to continue to sharpen the tools of the coach. What comes after that, I don't know. I'm still very much dipping my foot in and trying to get as much out of it and give back to rugby as possible. So we'll see. But it's been brilliant so far. And I think lots of people I play rugby with haven't necessarily stayed in the game. And I just think looking back at it was never really an option for me. I've always felt like I've got more to give back, and at the moment it's going well. I could be chatting to you in 3 months' time and say we just lost 5 games in a row, and I'm going to level 8.
Okay, amazing, mate. We'll leave that part of the podcast there and move on to the stash section. So, Gibbo, what's your favourite bit of stash that you've ever received?
It was when we got a gilet at Richmond. I think every year you get a similar stash bundle, don't you? They might change provider, but you get the shorts, get socks, and it does get a bit samey. But one year, the senior leaders group managed to wrangle us getting quite a smart gilet at Richmond Rugby Club. And of course, it was at Richmond Rugby Club. But that stood the test of time. I think I've still got it with me somewhere. And actually, I'll be wearing it tomorrow when I go and watch them play Chinna. But that was a good bit of stash, and it was quality. There was no £20, light fabric in there. It was nice. So yeah, that was good.
Nice, good choice. I think that's the first gilet that's ever been mentioned on there, but it's a great bit of kit. Now then, what's your favourite kit of all time? So this can be any team from any era.
That's I'm a fan of the old big collars. So I think it was the England one. Was it BT Cellnet across the front? I want to say. I think maybe blue collar. Maybe stripes on the cup. That is an all-time great. I've still got one of those stashed away somewhere, but they don't make them like they used to. You see some people wearing the match shirts, don't you, to games, and they're not for the average male build. It doesn't do anything for anyone. Can we just go back to baggy cotton and just everyone look okay? Yeah. One of the BT Cellnet Cotton Traders England shirt is right up there.
Nice. Okay, interesting. Good one. And what about awful kits? Anything that you really particularly dislike at the moment?
Mate, I think when we were sponsored by, was it Araya or what was it? Esher. It was an interesting year of stash. I think we got so much. We got sort of skins and leggings and everything only because it came at such a low price point. They can afford to give it to us, but. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I don't think they exist anymore. They did do good bags. I think we both still have their bags. But apart from that, I think it was pretty horrendous. Yeah, stick to the big boys, the Canterburys, the Nikes. Yeah, stick to those. Don't ever go to some weird Italian company. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I remember in particular the match shorts were awful that year. They're really terrible. That I made of cardboard or something.
When you got thighs like yours, you're gonna need good.
Well, that is true. Okay, we'll bring this to an end. Is there anything else you sort of want to say or any closing thoughts at all?
No, obviously I've seen some of your podcasts before. So if anyone, I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I am on Instagram. The famous Jamie Gibbs is on Instagram. It's at Jamie Gibbs 9, and that Tim's pulled up there for people who are watching. But it's at Jamie Gibbs 9, and then also Stow Rugby Club. I monitor their Instagram feed there, and that's just simply at Stow RFC. So it's particularly anyone in the Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire area who's looking to play rugby. We are always looking out for new players. Please come along. You can drop me a message, preferably on Instagram, but you can obviously Google Stow RFC. You'll find their website, and there's lots of contact details on there. But yeah, please get in touch.
Amazing, Gibbo. And for people listening at home, we'll link all of that up in the show notes below, which you can find at amateurrugbypodcast.com. So it just leaves me to say, Gibbo, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fun.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you.
There he goes. Okay, what a lot of value in there. So much good stuff about how to run an effective club, especially in that sort of right at the top level of the amateur, just bordering on semi-professional game. That was really interesting. Thank you so much for that, mate. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'd appreciate if you could hit subscribe if you haven't already, to make sure you don't miss out on the next ones. And if you're not watching on YouTube, well, you should get over there, because then you'll be able to see that me and Gibbo used to be called brothers back in our Arisha days, because we look fairly similar. Now, if you've enjoyed this podcast, you could do all the social media stuff, like, share, all that jazz. But what I'd really like it is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. So until then, get out and play.